This woman right here has been missing for 5 years, and the family of Michelle Parker thinks her ex-fiance knows what happened.
And it's not only Michelle Parker's family that's thinking that. There's a lot of people that looked into this case and they're coming to the same conclusion. It just all seems too simple. You've got a mother taking her twins over to their father's house, and that's the last time she's seen. She just disappears. And it happens to be around the same time that an appearance on the People's Court is airing, in which both of them turned out looking pretty bad. This is one of the more memorable cases that I've seen come out of Florida. Of course, I'm kind of personally attached to it after interviewing Michelle's father and stepmother about a year ago. This is the third episode that I'm actually doing on this, but today we're going to see how we keep the searchlight on and see if there's a new hope for the Michelle Parker case. Before we get into all the latest on the Michelle Parker case, there is something I have to tell you guys about. I'm doing a special appearance on a podcast called Today in True Crime. Today in True Crime is produced by Parcast. You can find it on Spotify, and it's a great idea. Basically, every single day, they are recounting true crime history. So the episode I'm doing is coming out on November 13th. That should be the day that you're watching this, if you're watching it on the day this video is released. And we are talking about the Amityville murders. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Be sure to follow Today in True Crime on Spotify, and you'll never run out of true crime content again. So here's a logo that some old school brain scratchers might recognize. This is the old Searchlight thumbnail for the original episode that I did on Michelle Parker back in March of 2017. And that was the old show format where I had the TV screen behind me. I also did a follow-up segment 1 year later with Michelle's father and stepmother. They came for an interview onto the channel. It was very touching, very emotional, you know. These cases already grab me just when I get to know them through the eye of the media, but then getting to learn more about the person and the experience that the family's going through directly from the family just kind of pulls me in a different way. And what we have going on this week is, of course, the 8th anniversary of her disappearance. Now, while we don't have the big development that I think we're all waiting for, finding out what actually happened, where Michelle is, and bringing her home so she could be put to rest respectfully, what we do have is a few developments and some things, some rumbling that I'm hearing about the investigation, which might point to hope. And that's something that I think this case really needs. We're also going to go into a case that has some similar aspects to it. This is almost a Brainscratch Searchlight update and a case cracked all in one. I just wanted to share a big reason why we should have hope like this by covering a case with similar elements, but a good outcome. So back to the NamUs profile. This is Michelle Laurie Parker. I'm not going to quite go over all the information again because I've got the links in the description box below. If you want to see the original Searchlight or the family interview, you can click on those. But this is what's so troubling about this. The missing person was last known to be dropping off her children with their father at his residence in Southeast Orlando. And we know the kids did make it there. So we have to assume at some point that she was there. But then she goes missing. Eventually, her vehicle is found in a different part of town, and eventually her cell phone is also found thrown into a river, if I'm recalling that correctly. So let's start with just a little bit of a brief recap at abcnews.go.com. The mother of a missing Florida woman who disappeared the same day her case appeared on the People's Court said her daughter was humiliated by the show. Michelle Parker, a mother of 3, was last seen Thursday afternoon while she dropped off her 3-year-old twins at her ex-fiancé Dale Smith's home. Parker also has an 11-year-old son from a previous relationship. That's something I wanted to touch on about this too. Obviously, her 11-year-old son is now at least 18, might be turning 19 very soon. it's just knowing people that have been through this, quite honestly, having a friendship with Sarah Turney and then also being a fan of hers and kind of seeing the work that she's doing with Voices of Justice and the work that she's done on other podcasts to raise awareness to her sister's case, which she suspects her father is responsible for. There's a heartbreaking aspect of knowing that there are 3 children involved here, and one of them is probably just about getting to that age where they can start asking some questions, start doing some research for themselves. And that's one of the tough things about this case. There are very simple questions that we just don't have the answers for. Dale, could have done an interview and really leveled out a whole bunch of the people's concerns and possibly repointed the investigation in the right direction if that's truly what this investigation needed. You've got the lead investigator calling him the only suspect. You've got the chief of police calling him the only suspect. If he is not responsible, everything he's doing is really harming this case by not being forthcoming and not being open about what the interaction was like on that day. A day that was obviously very emotionally charged. They have a history that some people would look at and say was not a good relationship. She tried to get a restraining order. It didn't quite go through. There's obviously some turbulence that you can see. And if you watch the People's Court appearance for yourself, you can certainly see it there as well. I don't feel like these are 2 people that brought out the best in each other. But does that mean that it brought out the absolute worst in one of them? That is one of those questions that's really tough to answer. And I think it's one of those questions that as these children get older, they're going to wonder about. I mean, as these children get older, as they really start exploring this topic for themselves, what's going to happen to them on this journey? Are they going to wind up doing podcasts and reaching out to people and trying to raise awareness to their mother's case as well? I don't think this topic goes away that easy. Are they going to wind up asking their father, how come you weren't helping trying to find her? There's just very, very simple questions that's going to be really tough for these children to deal with as they get older and kind of take this topic on with a more adult perspective and approach. And I don't think any amount of conditioning can really steer them away from that. I think we're all pretty hard wired in terms of understanding where we come from, that those are questions that have to be answered. You might be able to cover it up for a little while, but I don't think you're going to be able to cover it up forever. So I'm very curious about that aspect to all this as well. And I already hurt for these kids. I can see what Sarah's going through. She does not enjoy what she's doing. She wishes she had her answer. She cannot love her father because of what she's going through in the same way that she wants to. This is the person that biologically helped bring you into this planet, and you've got this piece that you just can't trust in them. So I really feel for the children in this, especially hearing that one of them is now just about hitting adulthood, and we've got the 3-year-old twins. At this point, they're hitting 11, 12. It's just a matter of time until some very hard things wind up in their laps. And, it could be that they're wondering about this stuff already. I'm really not certain. So there was a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed by Michelle's mother. I've tried to get some updates on that. As a matter of fact, the video clip that we started today's episode with, that came from a news segment that was done a few months after the last update I did on this. They have one particular question that they actually ask Dale about. So I'm going to play that for you in a little bit, but let's continue with information about the wrongful death suit. It took a little bit of a turn and quite honestly almost got completely dismissed in November of 2018, so just about a year ago. A wrongful death lawsuit against the suspect in Michelle Parker's disappearance case come close to being thrown out Thursday. The defense argued Thursday that the case has been stalled since early 2017, which is grounds for dismissal under the law. The family's attorney, Belvin Perry, said there was a reason for the delay, and he basically presented his case. One of the things he talked about was they really want to depose the lead investigator. So they want to question him and look at his files, but obviously this is an active investigation, so there's some sticky points. They can't just go through all the files in this case. So they were working to try to come to some agreement where they could still do a deposition with the lead investigator and still get that in. It seems like they were able to kind of work through that. The family's attorney also stated that they were busy in 2017 with a case that was actually connected to this one, and that was that Michelle's mother was fighting to see her grandchildren, the twins that Dale now has sole custody of. So the judge ultimately says those are reasonable. We get it, and we're going to not dismiss the case. We're going to go ahead and let it move forward. The family attorney, Belvin Perry, says he believes that he can have it ready for trial within the next year. Now, I haven't seen any updates on it since that, so I don't know if it is still being worked on. I haven't seen that it's been dismissed, but here we are a year later and really no updates in terms of the wrongful death suit. Some interesting angles here really have to do with the burden of proof for a civil suit like this is way lower than for actual criminal charges. And when you look at the nuts and bolts of this story, when we boil it back down to that real simple version, she's driving the kids over, somehow the kids get there, and she goes missing. Her car is found later, her cell phone's been thrown away. There was also an odd text message, I believe, that went to her brother. He asked where she was, and she said Waterford, which actually there is a Waterford Lakes area that's around there, but it's kind of away from where she works. When you look at the simple considerations of this case, I think it's already going to be at least a little bit of an uphill battle for the defense. Public perception on this case, I think, is pretty straightforward. I think everyone thinks that Dale is involved in this. There was some other things that happened with, if I recall correctly, his father's home got raided at some point, like in the middle of the night. They showed up and with a search warrant and searched through his father's home. So I don't know if there's possibly some connection where some family members might have helped him with this act in some way, something along those lines. But this being presented in a civil court proceeding, I'd be very curious to see what information comes out. And that's a big part of the reason why families in this situation will sometimes do these wrongful death lawsuits. They really just want to be able to get the person sat down somewhere, the person that they think is responsible, and ask them some questions and see how they respond to those questions. And that is certainly what also happened in this case. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and roll probably one of the most important questions. This is from Channel 6 News.
When he was asked, do you know anything about the disappearance of Michelle Parker, is that one of the questions he imposed his?
That's one of the questions he answered fully to the police. But at this point, for a variety of legal reasons that would take more time to explain than you have for, I advised him to take the Fifth Amendment.
That means if Dale Smith knows what happened to Parker, he still isn't saying.
Well, that's certainly a lawyery way of answering that. The short answer is yes, he did plead the Fifth to that question. So obviously he didn't want to incriminate himself by providing information about knowing where Michelle is. For the court of public opinion, a lot of people would say that means that he has some information and that he is likely involved in some way in her disappearance, or he's worried about getting in trouble for some reason for the information that he has, which means he might be less than forthright about what he actually knows. But of course, you have the lawyer kind of dropping in, well, he answered things completely to the police. We don't know that. We don't know what was said to the police. And quite honestly, being interviewed by the police and being in a deposition that is likely being recorded, I believe you actually have to swear in before the deposition. It's a whole different thing. That's material that is basically going to be used in court. Comments of the police, yeah, sure, may or may not be used, but I think there is a different, I guess we'll call it fidelity of truth that is expected for information that comes in through a deposition versus information that comes in through a police interview. So, you know, I guess it's kind of cute that his lawyer wanted to drop that in, but the short way of answering the question, which I like that the news broadcaster actually kind of straightened it out. Yep, he took the Fifth when it came to that question, which would make most of us think that he probably knows more than he's actually letting on. Continuing at mynews13.com, this is an article from the anniversary of her disappearance last year, but I think several of the sentiments still hold up to today. Family hopes for answers after 7 years of mother being missing. Obviously, we know that's 8 years now. Nobody deserves to have somebody kill them and take them away from everybody that loves them, said Yvonne Stewart, Parker's mother. She just vanishes and you have no answers. 7 years is 7 years too long, said Brad Parker, Michelle's father. I just miss her. Parker's family says the main detective is retiring. However, they are hopeful a new detective and a new police chief will spark new answers in the case. I feel good about it, said Brad Parker. I mean, fresh eyes, new thoughts. I'm hoping something will come out of it. A new chief and a new lead detective? Is that going to be what this case needs? It's pretty interesting because I can't think of a more well-known missing persons case in Orlando. I think tying it to the People's Court appearance is just something that really resonates with people. Really, as soon as you mention, oh, it's that missing person from the People's Court case, it just seems to light up everyone's memory on this case. So first of all, I think a police chief would love to have this thing closed out, especially just someone just coming into the role. And that's what we have here. They got the new police chief, Orlando Rolón. He has been there for, I think, just about a year at this point. The previous police chief actually retired from the position so that he could run for sheriff. He did win that, so he is acting as sheriff in the area right now. But remember how I started this video looking at NamUs? I did that because I wanted to see if the detective that was the contact person in the NamUs record changed from back when I did my first video in 2017. And it has. Now they have a detective listed there named Detective Teresa Sprague. And after looking into Teresa a bit online, I think this could be a really good change for this case. Detective Sprague is also the vice president of an organization called SEHIA. I don't know if they pronounce it SEHIA, but it stands for the Southeastern Homicide Investigators Association. It's an organization that hosts conferences where they get homicide investigators together from all over the nation. They share their cases with each other and try to find new angles on solving them. As a matter of fact, I have a little clip of hers I want to share with you guys right now.
You don't really think as much about the ones that you've solved and the justice you've gotten for folks, but we never let go of the ones we don't solve. So when we come to week-long conferences like this, we're always talking about the ones we didn't solve. And we want to re-look at some of those and have those conversations.
I really love the perspective that she brought to that. It's just such a good point to hear it from a homicide investigator and have it phrased that way. It's the ones we don't solve that we keep thinking about. And they essentially have started an association where homicide investigators can get together and talk about those cases and get new thoughts, new ideas, kind of exactly what Michelle's father was talking about in the last article, new eyes and new thoughts on this case. So seeing her name attached to this case certainly gives me a really good dose of hope for it. But on top of that, there is another name that has been attached to this case. The lead investigator is a man named Detective Michael Fields, and he is now the lead investigator because the previous lead investigator has retired. Detective Michael Fields, just in the past few days, has made headlines for working out a problem that we've discussed a few times before on this channel and specifically on the first season of 3 Men and a Mystery. That problem is about GEDmatch. If you guys have been following true crime, you know that GEDmatch is the tool that has been used for DNA genealogy information that is essentially solving case after case after case and major cases. And then, of course, in May, GEDmatch kind of got locked down where law enforcement can't use it quite the same way unless you opt in to allow them to do that on your specific profile. So what has Detective Michael Fields hit the news for recently? He solved a big problem that I think is going to give a framework for many homicide detectives to be able to continue cracking their cases using GEDmatch. But let's learn more over at WFTV.com. It's kind of hard to see him behind the play button, but this is Detective Fields right there. So he had used GEDmatch once before, back in 2018, to solve a case that he was working on. Then he got a new case, and he's like, all right, well, I'm going to go use GEDmatch again. And that's when he found out about the information lockdown that GEDmatch has done. I just applied the same thing we've been doing for years to this new thing, Fields said. He wrote up a search warrant of more than 50 pages. Quote, since it was the first search warrant ever written against a genealogy website, I made sure every I was dotted, every T was crossed, Fields said. A judge signed it, and GEDmatch responded within 24 hours, letting Fields push aside those privacy settings and search the website's database of about 1.5 million people. So basically, he got to use GEDmatch like everyone was using it prior to May, and all he had to do was get the details right in this warrant that he wrote up. And the great thing about that is this is now a framework. You know, I used to work in legal departments for several different companies, including 20th Century Fox. And a big part of what they do is they'll essentially have kind of boilerplate contracts, you know, contracts that are already written out with all the details a certain way. Then they kind of touch them up and they personalize them for a particular instance. What I believe he has done here is given police departments all over the nation now a framework that they can follow for doing the same thing, for getting their search warrants in. Now, admittedly, there's probably details of the case that are going to have to be submitted with that to enable it, but at least he has now broken through with a new precedent of being able to do that. Now, is that going to come into play in this case? I really don't know. I don't know how much I consider this case a DNA case. The only thing that I could really think of in terms of DNA that might be interesting is what they could have found in her vehicle when it was located, or possibly if they could have done some type of DNA testing on her phone when that was located. But even that, the results would kind of be hard to pin down. You know, this was someone that she dated for a period of time. This is the father of her children. Is there likely that his DNA is going to be on some items of hers? I think that's pretty reasonable to assume. So I don't know that this is a DNA case, but the mentality that we're talking about here, this guy hit a new problem, took out an old tool, and literally busted through that problem. This is something that everyone in the true crime community has been worried about for months. There's been whole movements that are basically getting together, trying to remind people to opt in on GEDmatch. And now we're finding we've got one clever detective here that figured out a way to do it. And it's kind of the right way to do it. He got a warrant, and now he has access to GEDmatch, and now he's able to move that particular case forward. He hasn't solved this new case with the information from GEDmatch yet, but we'll see where that goes from here. I also got to tell you, I ran into a resume of this guy, and you know, the first page and a half is kind of his work experience, which, by the way, he's not only, of course, a certified police officer, homicide detective. He's worked as a drug enforcement agent. I believe he's worked in undercover, actually, if I remember correctly. He's also he was certified as a paramedic. He was certified as a firefighter. This guy is pretty amazing. And for about 3 pages of his resume, it's all the additional classes and certifications that he's done to bolster his career. And it's a lot. This guy seems really, really solid. And to know that he broke through this problem, to say I'm impressed is an understatement. So am I hopeful about what's going on with Michelle's case? Let's just do a quick inventory check. I've still got one great story to share with you guys that I think is going to tie into this even more. But we're talking a new lead detective that is innovative. We're talking another detective working on it that is part of an organization that they actually get together to help solve these cases. I'm feeling like that is a really good team. And then on top of that, you've got a new police chief that I'm telling you, I'm sure he would love to have the department recognized for solving this case. Am I feeling hopeful like something could happen around this case? Absolutely. But let's finish it off with kind of a quick little mini case cracked about another case that has some similar things to this. A big thank you to Christy Groves for sending this article my way. I've got a couple of other ones to flesh out the story a little bit, but this is actually from a blog called, I think it's Tequila. Hope I'm saying that right. This is in the Washington state in the United States. Police say that on the evening of November 9th, 1998, 28-year-old female Anna Nguyen, the mother of an 11-year-old daughter, left her Shorewood area Burien home, telling her mother she was going to visit her fiancé. Nguyen has not been seen or heard from since that night. Detectives suspected foul play early in the investigation. They learned that the day that she was reported missing, she had plans to fly to Reno, Nevada with her fiancé to get married. Continuing over at seattlepi.com. On November 11th, 1998, her vehicle was found in a Tequila casino parking lot. An ex-boyfriend of hers, Fan Sang, who was 42 years old at the time, was interviewed during the investigation. Though he denied any involvement, he kept changing the story of where he was at the time that Nguyen vanished. Her body was never found. A death certificate was issued for her in 2015. Then this year, detectives with the King County Sheriff's Office re-examined the case and its evidence. New facts were gathered this time around that allowed investigators to make an arrest. Surveillance video from 1998, recently reviewed again by detectives, shows Sang arriving at the casino from the direction where Nguyen's car was found and leaving about 2 minutes later in a different direction. No footage shows her at the casino. Further surveillance footage and records show that he tried using multiple ATMs to withdraw cash from her accounts. And his brother eventually told detectives that Sang asked him to tell police that they were working together on November 9th, but the brother says they weren't actually working together on that day. Additionally, charging documents showed Sang has prior felony and misdemeanor convictions involving Nguyen. The charges of assault, interfering with domestic violence, reporting, and malicious mischief resulted from an encounter with her on September 25th, where he strangled her, broke her framed photographs, and threw her phone after she told him she wanted to end their relationship. Sang was booked Friday into the King County Jail on investigation of murder. So how do I see this tying to Michelle's case? We've got no body found. We've got foul play suspected from early on in the outset. We've got a suspect in this case, previous relationship, ex-boyfriend. There is a past that they have that does include some domestic violence that was reported. I think there's a lot of similarities between these two cases, but one of the things that I'm most blown away about with this case in particular is the information that they're talking about is not new information to the investigation. They went through surveillance video that they obviously had gathered back in 1998. There's no way that they would go back to those locations now and be able to get that video. So they had the video this whole time. What it took was the right investigator, the right detective to get in there and to look at it all again. I think the only thing that I could see in here that you might assume is new information is possibly if Sang's brother, if that is from a recent interview where they went and spoke to him again about the details. But outside of that, surveillance footage showing Sang using multiple ATMs trying to withdraw cash, that had to be captured at the time. The surveillance footage from the casino, that had to be captured at the time. What I'm hoping is we've got a similar situation where the answers are already in the file and you just need the right person to look at it the right way to see them. And between these two detectives that we spoke about today with the Orlando Police Department, I think the chance of that occurring in a case like Michelle Parker's, I'm feeling pretty good about, quite honestly. And then, of course, I know we spoke a little bit about how the children are impacted in that. With this case, we also had a child that doesn't know what happened to her mother since the age of 11. Finally, we get the answers, Tien said. Her name is Kim Tien. It impacted everything from my relationships, my personality. College was impacted, and because my mom was the main figure growing up and I only had a grandma, I lost many benefits. Tien says she learned about Sang's arrest when detectives stopped by her home late last week to deliver the news. I just felt I didn't have to worry. It's what, 21 years? It's finally solved, so I'm more than happy. Don't give up hope, Tien said. And that's really what I wanted to hit with this video. We can't give up hope in Michelle's case. I know her family is in a really tough situation. Imagine the person you think is responsible for taking your loved one away has her children. It almost feels like a very bizarre, emotional hostage situation. As a matter of fact, her mom's comments early on with the court case that she had filed against him were trying to say like what a good father he was and all this stuff. I don't know if she's still making comments to that effect, but of course you're going to say that. You're worrying about the welfare of your grandchildren at this point. But to Kim's point here, it's going to affect you not having your mother around. She wondered about what happened to her mother for all these years. I know the same thing's going to happen to those children. One thing I'm hopeful for is I know how caring the family is that's waiting to embrace those children and their questions and their concerns about everything that's happened. So I'm just hopeful that when the kids hit the right age and are able to make their own decisions about who they can talk to and what questions they can ask, that they know that they've got grandparents there waiting to have those conversations with them. So to Michelle's family, I think we have to keep Kim Tien's words in our heart, and that is, don't give up hope. That case took 21 years. We might not be at the end of this road yet. I wish we were. But it might take even more time. It might take more energy and more effort. But I got to tell you, after looking into the detectives today, the new people that are working on this case, and hearing from a source, I don't want to go too much into this information, but hearing that there is definitely renewed interest in this case, I'm feeling a big dose of hope in this case, and I hope that I can share that with all of you out there too. So let's talk about this case in the comments down below. And before I end today's video, I have to thank several new patrons: Lisa Lambert, Anne, Caitlin Wall, and Garrett Morton. On top of that, we had Allison Burr and Summer Casey increase their pledges. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do that at www.lordandarts.com. You can sign up for Patreon, PayPal, buy merchandise. All of it helps keep me here doing what I love doing, spending time with you guys and helping these families in these terrible and tough situations. Friday is going to be a very special Brainscratch. It's actually based on the Searchlight episode we did last week on Adrian Quintal. There's a ton of new information that has been released, and for me personally, it has moved this case out of Searchlight territory and into Brainscratch territory. I've got some things I'm planning for Friday's episode, so I don't want to go into it too much because I have to make sure they come through. But regardless, we're going to get into the new information. We're going to see if we can continue to help that family raise exposure and find that critical tip. Someone out there has the info on that case. As a matter of fact, someone out there has the info on this case too. So of course, in the description box below, if you have information on the Michelle Parker disappearance that you want to share with the authorities, please use the contact info in the details box below. Take care, everyone. I'll see you back here on Friday with a new episode of Brainscratch on the Lord and Arts channel.